Welcome back, everybody. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. This is Naveen Jain, founder and CEO of Viome. Naveen is an entrepreneur and philanthropist driven to solve the world's biggest challenges through innovation. He's a founder of several successful companies, including Moon Express, Blue Dot, Viome, Intellius, TalentWise, and InfoSpace. Naveen is a trustee of the board and Vision Circle member at the X Prize Foundation, where he's focused on finding entrepreneurial solutions to address the global challenges in health, education, women's empowerment, agriculture, and energy. Naveen has been awarded many honors for his entrepreneurial successes and leadership skills, including Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Albert Einstein Technology Medal for Global Thinker Award by IILM, um, I'm sorry, I think I read the wrong part. Albert Einstein Technology Medal for Pioneers in Technology. The next one is actually, I think, the most impressive. Humanitarian Innovation Award at the United Nations. Distinguished Global Thinker Award by IILM, Most Inspiring Entrepreneur by Andaz TV, Most Admired Serial Entrepreneur by Silicon India, Top 20 Entrepreneurs, and Lifetime Achievement Award for the leadership in the technology industry and support of other entrepreneurs by Red Herring. So Naveen, welcome. You have too many awards there. That's why I got mixed up.
Oh, Linda, first of all, those means nothing. What really matters is how many you're actually improving while you're still living.
I think that's absolutely true. And it sounds like you don't waste a moment to try to improve many people's lives. So, for the purpose of today's conversation, where we're talking about your work with your current company, Viome, let's just start with what is the microbiome and why should we care about it?
Well, first of all, let me just step back for a second here. So at Viome, we fundamentally started a company with a one single belief. What if we could create a world where being sick is truly a matter of choice, not a matter of bad luck? And really imagine that we as humanity, why should we have to suffer from these chronic diseases? We are not born with them. And these diseases are primarily the lifestyle diseases. There is nothing in our body that's written that says when you turn 40, you have diabetes. When you turn 50, you're going to have heart disease. You turn 60, you're going to have Alzheimer. These are somehow we have come to believe that as we age, we are bound to get these diseases. And the fact is, none of us really have to. And I think so. To me, the reason we started to look at microbiome was because fundamentally we have been looking at the human biology from a very wrong perspective. We have come to the belief in our medical system that we came from an infectious disease mind share. But anytime we hear bacteria, anytime we hear virus, and we think, oh my God, we need to kill them. What we don't realize is they are actually part of who we are. To answer your question, microbiome, micro is small and biome is life. So these are the small organisms that we can't see with our eyes. There are 100 trillion of them. Imagine 100 trillion of them in our body. So on our skin, in our nose, in our mouth, in our gut, all over us. Every time we are breathing billions of them in and we are breathing the billions of them out. We really are literally a walking, talking ecosystem. Now, you would wonder, what are these organisms doing in our body? Well, guess what? As we evolve, we co-evolve with them. Remember, they were here 3.5 billion years before humanity ever started. We actually outsource many of our functions to them. So, for example, when we eat raw fruits, raw vegetables, all the fiber, our body cannot digest fiber. It goes to our gut, and these microbes actually digest the fiber for us. And in turn, they release the nutrients that our body needs, short chain fatty acids such as butyrate, right? And my point is, our body decided, as opposed to making our thing very complex, let's outsource many of these functions to these microbiome that's in our gut. And by the way, same thing in our saliva. Our oral microbiome is not simply there And when your mother says to chew your food, she's actually the scientist. She's not saying make the food smaller because it's going to get stuck in your throat. No, she's asking you to mix the oral microbes and let these oral microbes actually pre-digest the food for you, and they send the signal to the gut to tell them what is coming, so the actually this pre-processed food now can be digested by our body, right? And all these things are happening simultaneously. So to me, the couple of things we as humanity and as doctors and as our science got it wrong, which was somehow our genes are our destiny. What we come to realize now is that our DNA is not our destiny. In fact, less than 5% of the diseases are fully penetrant. That means less than 5% of the time when we have a certain genetic mutation, you're going to have a disease. Everything else is actually controlled by us. Now, now I'm going to tell something that I think most people are going to find fascinating because I did. Your DNA never changes. So if you take your DNA today and you gain 200 pounds, your DNA is still the same. Now, if you become depressed, your DNA is still the same. Now you get heart disease, you get diabetes, you get all these diseases, your DNA never changes. So what is actually changing is your gene expression. So your genes don't change, your gene expression is changing. And we at Viome fundamentally believe measuring the gene expression tells us when you're moving towards a disease or when you're moving away from a disease, because DNA is static. And what we measure, 4-letter word that has become a common word during, and that 4-letter word is not what you're thinking, it's mRNA. mRNA is what we measure because mRNA tells us exactly what's happening in your body. And at Viome, we look at the mRNA of the human host, which is what's happening in our thing, what's the inflammation looking like. And we look at in your gut. So we look at what these microbes in our gut are actually producing. Because based on that, now, Linda, we can actually tell you what foods are good for you, what foods are bad for you. So even though this summit is all about food as a medicine, I'm here to tell you there is no such thing as universal healthy food. A
So let's just
food that
pause
is,
there. Yeah.
huh?
If that's okay. So
Yeah.
coming from the perspective of a practicing internist, a primary care doctor who sees many, many patients each day, I think you've made some really important points here that might be news to some people, may not be to others. I think that many people do see their genes as destiny and maybe do not harness the power of what can I do differently for myself that can change that destiny, right? That's what you're saying basically.
That's right.
And
That's right.
what it sounds like you're trying to do is kind of get our each individual's genetic microbiome footprint to see what is it that you need. So tailoring this as opposed to making it generalized for everybody.
That's
So
right.
tell me, how is your microbiome different from my microbiome? Maybe that's a good place to start.
So first of all, if you think your DNA is unique, we in fact have very different microbiome. The two people living together have completely different microbiome. In fact, the identical twins that are born with identical DNA, the paternal twins, may have completely different microbiome. In fact, now the research has shown if you have identical twins, one of them may develop a disease, one of them doesn't. If you feed them exactly the same food, they will have a completely different response to it. So I can feed the bread to one person and they will have a high glycemic response, and in some other person they will have low glycemic response. And we already know intuitively some people can eat bread and pasta all day, they never get fat, and some of us smell bread and pasta and we get fat, right? Very different metabolism we all have, and that is what our gut microbiome does. So what we do is by looking at the epigenetic. So epigenetic is basically tells you what genes are going to be expressed. So you have your genes or your DNA, and then you have these epigenetics that actually control which genes are going to be expressed and how much. And we're looking at the gene expression through mRNA. So we know which genes are overexpressed, what genes are underexpressed. And we look at both in your blood, and we look at them in your gut through stool, and we look at them in your saliva through oral microbiome. And once we look at all of that, we are able to deduce and say, you know what? You shouldn't be eating broccoli, even though you mom told you that broccoli is good for you, or the Brussels sprout are very healthy for you, or cabbage is good for you. We, in fact, when we see that your gut microbes are producing a lot of sulfide, and we know these food contains a lot of sulfate, is going to get converted into sulfide, and sulfide is inflammatory compound, is going to cause more inflammation, that is going to cause more diseases. So what we do is we say avoid these food. Now, people say spinach, isn't spinach good for everyone? Well, it turns out it is not, because when your gut microbiome are not able to digest and don't have the pathways to digest oxalate, and the spinach is very high in oxalate. So even though Popeye told everyone that eat spinach and you become healthy, just remember, Popeye was not the scientist, right? So spinach is good for some people and it is harmful to others. Same thing is true for protein. Lot of people take protein because they think this is what's going to help them build muscles, and protein is the fundamental thing for human life. Guess what? When you eat protein, and if it's not digested in the upper intestine, it goes to our gut, and our microbes actually ferment that protein, and during fermentation it releases lot of ammonia, which causes a massive amount of inflammation. So now we have two choices: either take the digestive enzymes with the protein, or cut down that protein. And that's literally what Viome does. We measure what's happening in your body. So we send you at home test kit. So when you go to viome.com and you order your test, here's what happens. We ask you at home to send us a couple of drops of blood, a touch of stool, and very soon a couple of drops of your saliva. And then we analyze everything and we tell you what is your gut health, what is your biological age, what is your immune health, what is your mitochondrial health, what is your cellular health. And then we give you all the things underneath, all the different things that are going on. What is your digestive efficiency, what is your metabolic rate, what is your sulfide production, the uric acid production. And then we say, here are the foods you should avoid and why. Here are the foods you should superfoods, and here is why. And then we say you need 22 milligram of elderberry, you need 7 milligram of curcumin, you need 79 milligram of amylase. And if you want, we make those capsules with those ingredients on demand, robotically tailor made for you, and ship them to you. And every 4 months or 6 months, when you do a test again, you can see for yourself all the improvement that you're making. So it's no longer about have faith in us, it is about the facts. So don't think the supplements are simply based on faith, because today you take vitamin D, zinc, and hoping that your immunity is building up. How do you know that? In our case, we tell you what your immune health is, and you can measure your immune health after. So everything you can see what's happening in the body. And the fact we have 250,000 people that have come before you, we are able to use the AI to be able to say, when we see this pattern, elderberry doesn't work, you have to give them berberine. And we know based on all these patterns which nutrients are going to work for you, which nutrients are not going to work for you. And every single person who joins benefits from everyone before them, and they contribute for the benefit of humanity for everyone who is going to be coming in the future. And that is the part of the flywheel, is that we humanity, if we come together, we can go back to what we knew, Linda. You're probably thinking, what a great science we have created here, without realizing that you are obviously a physician. The Hippocrates, what he said, not do no harm. Hippocrates says all diseases begin in the gut. Let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. And I think there was contemporary of him who said, one man's food is another man's poison. Right? My point is, all these things we have known, now we can scientifically tell you exactly what foods are good for you and what foods are poison for you. And by the way, what's happening in your gut, what is causing the diseases. And just to give you some idea, we just got the FDA approval to detect oral cancer and throat cancer from saliva. Right? This is a breakthrough device designation. And we are now working on 2 vaccines for colorectal cancer and other autoimmune diseases, because we are able to see what's happening in your gut that is causing the body to react to cause cancer, and how these microbes are protecting the cancer. And by the way, the microbes not only protect the tumor, when you take a immunotherapy, whether immunotherapy works or does not work depends on how your gut microbes are interacting with our immune system. 70% of our immune system is along our gut lining. And so it's constantly interacting. By the way, when you get the skin disease like acne or eczema, it is not on the skin disease. It is actually the inflammation that's happening in your body, and the chronic inflammation from the gut or from your gum is causing the inflammation that shows up as acne, eczema. Depression and anxiety is an inflammatory disease. Our gut and our brain are connected through the vagus nerve, and we can now show clearly. And we published the paper, Linda, that people should see. It's a published paper where we gave people the precise nutrition, and in 4 months we were able to show the clinical score of depression came down by 40%. Clinical score for anxiety came down by 36%. The clinical score for IBS came down by 40%, and by actually diabetes score came down by 30%. Right? These are simply using the food, not drugs.
So that's really very powerful. Those numbers are impressive, Naveen. I mean, they're beyond what we can accomplish with what
Drugs.
I do by prescribing prescriptions,
Yeah.
by what I do in terms of counseling. So this has great power if we can bring this to more people. What do you think are going to be the next steps in wider adoption, which obviously will entail payment by insurers for this sort of testing?
Yeah. So again, I mean, again, I don't want us to be thinking about that people are somehow bad people. Our medical industrial complex, if you look at today in the United States, the medical industrial complex of the United States, everyone gets paid when people are sick, and no one gets paid when people are healthy. So no one has incentive to cure anyone. If you have a chronic disease, for a pharma company, you have a lifetime subscriber. You have an autoimmune disease, let's not figure out what's causing the autoimmune disease. Let's suppress the immune system, so you have to take the biologic for the rest of your life. And God forbid if you get infection and now you have more pills to take. So every pill you take causes 3 diseases. And by the way, pharmaceutical companies have pills for those 3 diseases. And when you take them, it causes 9 diseases, but they have pills for them too. And by the time you get to my age, you're popping more pills than blueberries. And there is a problem with that, right? So to me, again, I'm not saying that is a conspiracy, but the only way is, remember, at least in US, our insurance companies that we think are really our savior, they are regulated. They have to return 85% of the premium back to the pool. So if they somehow cure people, they have to make less money now. They have to reduce the premium. So they rather keep the people sick so they can keep increasing the premium and they make more money. So it's really, until we rechange the system, until we allow people who are sick to become the CEO of their own health, unless we allow every individual to believe they can impact their own health. And by the way, the COVID has been the best thing that could have happened to the humanity, despite the fact we lost millions of great souls, millions of great humans. But it accelerated the healthcare by a decade. We would not have telehealth for a decade to come. It accelerated that. Remote education, it accelerated that. The main thing it did is it told people that it used to be that I do what I do. When I get sick, I go to the hospital. And what we learned during COVID was the last thing I wanted to do was to get sick and go to the hospital. Guess what we did? We started to work out. We started to exercise. We started to eat healthy. And we started to take supplements to actually keep us build our immunity. We realized our choices have health consequences. This year, there was no flu. Magically, the flu disappeared. What happened? Because we did not mix, we wore masks, and suddenly we realized something that used to be inevitable, that come winter you're going to have flu. We realized, oh, the flu doesn't actually has to happen. But point I'm trying to make is, once people realize that they actually are the control of their own health, and these at-home tests are actually now bypassing the medical system, and these at-home tests are giving, using AI, more information to the people than their primary care physicians ever had. We can now tell you all your inflammatory markers. Remember, From the blood, we are able to look at every single cytokine transcript. We look at every pro-inflammatory marker. We can tell you what histamine response you're going to get. Are you having a bacterial response, viral response, histamine response? And we can actually now give you the right food, which are low histamine, to be able to control your pathways, right? So point I'm trying to make is this, despite in the middle of a pandemic, it looks like a disaster for humanity. 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this as a pivotal moment where healthcare changed forever, where people started to believe that they can control their own health. And I really believe the future of health is going to be delivered at home, not at the hospital. And the future of medicine is going to come from a farm, not from a pharmacy.
Well, that's very exciting. And that seems like first of all, a very positive spin on this terrible pandemic and all the horrible things that have happened. But it definitely is true that we had great advances in both vaccine development and use of telemedicine, which were always hanging in the background, but we were forced to accelerate now. Um, and of course, I would say, there is this medical industrial complex, but the people working in that complex, myself
Yep,
included, I think
yep,
most of us would be happy if we never had sick
that's
people
it.
again, and if we eliminated most of those diseases. And it's exciting to think that this might be in our hands. But how can one company do this for society?
Oh, it's very simple. It is not us who is doing it. It is really the humanity is coming together to do it for themselves. We are simply a conduit. Remember, when we sell the test, we make close to $5 to $10 on that test. We, as our cost down from $1,000 to $129, we sell our test for $149 right now, right? So my point is, we're trying to keep it as low as possible to be able to understand what causing people to have a disease. Now, Linda, just to give you some background on myself, I came from India with poverty. We didn't have food to eat. We didn't have a place to stay. God, I came to this country with $5 in my pocket. God has been very kind to us. There is no amount of money I make is going to change my life, right? I am here to dedicate my life to helping people live better. And I lost my own dad to cancer. And I made him a promise that I'm not going to give up until we solve this problem. And today, we're getting closer and closer to understanding what is causing the cancer to happen. And most people may not realize we have now analyzed probably 20 different types of cancer, and we found there are microbes inside the tumor. Imagine the microbes are inside the tumor. Why would they be there? Well, in fact, the tumor is displaying the microbial peptide on the surface of the tumor. Why would an organism put a foreign substance on its surface to invite the immune system? Only reason is because these microbes are displaying the peptide and biomimicking the self, and that immune system thinks is part of the organ and doesn't attack it. And it's protecting the tumor, and tumor is actually feeding the microbes. Now, imagine if we can now use this mechanism to be able to kill those microbes, and essentially the immune system can attack the tumor. We, in fact, found a research that just came out that they had a melanoma patients and did the immunotherapy. And as you may know, the immunotherapy works on about 25% of the people. So they took all the people where the immunotherapy did not work, and all they did was change their gut microbiome through fecal transplant. And suddenly the immunotherapy started working. Now imagine that. Now, if a fecal transplant, which is changing your gut microbiome, can make the drugs to work, suddenly now you can look at the future of gut microbiome. In fact, when you take a drug like metformin, or you take a drug like levodopa, which is for Parkinson's, or digoxin, in fact, these drugs are digested and metabolized by a gut microbiome. And depending on what the microbes do to it, their effectiveness and side effects can vary, right? So that means even the drugs, the effectiveness and their side effects vary by people. So and that's the reason some people the drug works and some people it doesn't. Some people it has more side effects, some people it doesn't. And in fact, the identical twins can have a completely different response. And that is the key to understanding that we are not alone. We are 100 trillion microbes, and with a little bit of a sprinkling of human DNA on that, And we have to really think of ourselves as an ecosystem outside and the ecosystem inside. So when we change the ecosystem outside, it affects us. And when we change the ecosystem inside, it affects us. And that is really the key.
That's great. That's a different perspective. So we have a few questions coming in. So let's start with
Please.
those. The first is, in precision food, do you
Yeah.
think we should combine both microbiome and host genetics? And how do you take into account the factors like circadian rhythm, mood, and change in environments which affect microbiome while prescribing precision food? I know that was a lot, so I can
No,
repeat
no, I
some of
think this, I totally understand that. So first of all, thank you for asking the question. We actually do look at the host gene expression. So remember, when we're looking at the blood, we are actually analyzing all the human host gene expression. And we on the gut, we are looking at all the gut microbial expression, and we're looking at the interaction between the two. And by the way, so looking at the mRNA tells us all the changes that are happening due to the environment, due to the circadian rhythm, due to your sleep or lack of sleep for that matter. And in fact, now we are able to show that precision food, we in fact, as I said, we have 250,000 people. They're constantly telling us that within 3 to 4 months, they sleep better. They no longer have bloating or gas or IBS like symptoms. They in fact have, acne and eczema is gone. They have all of these things we call diseases were simply the symptom of inflammation. And when you get rid of the inflammation, these things, so-called diseases, go away. And I think this is something that I never understood, Linda, that you as a physician will appreciate it. We take these set of these symptoms and we name them, and suddenly it becomes a noun that you have a diabetes. No, you don't have a diabetes. All you have is these symptoms that are causing your blood glucose level to go up, and your insulin is no longer able to control it, and now you have become insulin resistance. Now imagine, now we are able to, by the way, we published the paper not only to be able to predict the glycemic response for each food individually for each person based on their gut microbiome, we also were able to show that when metformin is going to work or not work, and able to manipulate the gut microbes through food and supplements to show that your risk of diabetes can come down by 30% in 4 months. And this is, by the way, all published peer-reviewed papers.
So that's really fascinating. There are a couple more questions, but on the
Yeah,
note of diabetes,
yeah,
and in talking, you're focusing on the precision nutrition. What do
yeah.
you think about the other lifestyle factors such as exercise, stress management, sleep, etc.?
Yeah. So I think very good question. So first of all, remember our gut and a brain are connected to each other. So when you have a nutritional deficiency, it changes your brain, and in some sense, our gut causes us to have anxiety. So when you have large people who go on a keto diet, they actually become anxious. In fact, we have a published paper in, uh, I think it's in Cell magazine, that we published on a biological age, and it turned out the biggest offender of biological age, that means how you're aging, is your keto diet. When you go on a keto diet, you may look thin, but you completely effed up your body. It is the worst offender of your aging. Second is the paleo diet. So all these fat diets are actually hurting your health. So just be very careful when you go on these fat diets. You need to be eating a balanced nutrition for your body. And that is something we all have to do. So coming back to your question, when you are stressed, it releases the corticoid, and the corticoid changes the gut microbiome. And when you have a nutritional deficiency, it changes through the vagus nerve. It actually changes your brain, and it causes anxiety, depression. And in fact, with a leaky gut, now it's clear, at least the hypothesis that Alzheimer and Parkinson's are caused by the microbes that are either coming from the leaky gum or leaky gut, that actually infect the blood-brain barrier and make it permeable, causing infection in the brain. And your glial cells are releasing the amyloid beta to protect itself, and that ends up causing many of these neurodegenerative diseases. And I think there are a lot of now hypotheses around these diseases being the infectious diseases.
Yes. Okay. But just to follow up on that,
You
sleep
should do
and
all of them.
exercise. You should do all of those.
Sleep helps microbiome, and your microbiome helps sleep. So when your gut microbiome has its own circadian rhythm, so when you eat at the same time and you sleep at the same time, everything is stay in the rhythm. When you start to eat late and you eat at odd hours, your gut your microbial circadian rhythm is now different from your body, the brain circadian rhythm, and you actually get a poor sleep. So you need to eat properly, eat at the same time, and sleep at the same time. You need to reduce the stress so you don't release the corticoid, and you also need to eat properly so you don't get anxious and depressed. You need to exercise because exercise changes the gut microbiome. And in fact, when you exercise, your gut microbiome changes in a way that actually allows you to bring more energy to you. So you will feel more energetic. And by the way, we have now shown people who would take the right precision food, they actually have less brain fog and higher energy.
Great, excellent. Okay, so getting to a few more of the
Yes.
questions. The next one is, I think you addressed a little bit in your discussion. Who's accessing precision nutrition currently? Is it exclusively for the very wealthy, or will it at some point become more generally accessible?
Well, the point is, it is actually becoming more and more accessible, and it's going to become even more. So remember, when we started the company 5 years ago, the cost of the test alone was $1,000, and now it is $149. Right? Same type of thing. These precision supplements, just the supplements alone would have cost you close to $500 to $600. We actually make every capsule for you. So for every individual, whether you need 50 ingredients or 70 ingredients, every probiotic strain, every prebiotic, every digestive enzyme, amino acid, food extracts, vitamins, minerals, herbs, everything we need, we put them in 8 capsules for you with a stick pack on probiotics and prebiotics. And we sell them at $149 a month, which is substantially cheaper, which are basically made to order, everything you need, nothing that you don't. So our hope is in the next 1 year, our cost will come down and the cost of the test will come down to close to $50, maybe $10 someday when we get to microfluidics. So we are developing the microfluidics technology that will allow us to do a test for under $10, and we're going to sell the test for $10, right? And as a cost of building these supplements through robotics is coming down, we're going to continue to reduce the price. We are not here to make money. We are here to solve the problem, but building it sustainably so we can be around to see on the other side of the things where we actually problem does get solved. Because if we spent $100 million of our own money already on the company, so we do actually. So just so you know, despite everything, 250,000 people, we have invested $100 million that we in fact in our technology alone, and we still are losing, by the way, just so you know, we still lose about $25 million a year, right? So but we are absolutely believe that sooner or later our costs will come down and we won't be losing money.
And that would be fantastic to make it more accessible to many
Yeah.
people who could really use it. Okay, next question is, what is the source of nutrition profile data used to inform personalized food recommendations?
So again, remember, every food is a bunch of chemicals and substrate in the food. So we look at the substrates in the food, and we have a whole food ontology that looks at every single ingredient that is in the food. And then we look at all the gene expression. Gene expression tells us what molecules are going to be produced. And then we actually use basically what we call the math and chemistry, that if this thing comes as an input, how this input is going to be modified by your gut microbiome. Is the output going to be beneficial to the body, or the output is going to be toxin to the body? And then we change the substrate, the input, which is the food, to make sure that it provides a higher, more and more of good stuff and less of the bad stuff. I mean, it's that simple.
Okay, great. The next question is, the microbiome will be very different depending on geographical location. How do you account for that variability?
So maybe I didn't make it clear. We don't look at the microbes. We look at what microbes are producing. So remember, two people can have completely different microbes producing exactly the same thing that causes people to have IBS or diabetes or depression. So we are looking at the output of microbes, not the microbes themselves. And that is fundamentally where I think, why we are succeeding where others have failed. Everyone was looking at the microbes, and when they look at two people with diabetes, they can have completely different microbes. In our case, we are looking at how they actually digest fructose. And if we look at the fructose pathway is not active, that's all matters to us. We don't care what microbes are there. So we are looking at the underlying mechanism of these microbes, and that is what allows us to see what different foods need to be given to each person. And geographically, by the way, we are currently in 40 different countries, and we took the same glycemic response test that we did in US, and we took it to Japan. And exactly, since we were based on functionality of the microbiome, not the microbiome, the same model worked in Japan that worked for US.
Great. I think that's a very important clarification. Next, oh, sorry. Yes. How frequently do you recommend people retest their microbiome? Will frequent testing be practical or scalable?
Yeah. So we, obviously when you are sick, if you want to get better sooner, you want to adjust your body as quickly as possible. So you do a test, and if you really are suffering, then you should do every 3 months, and we readjust every time you do a test. We readjust what your nutrients are now needed compared to what they needed 3 months ago, and we can readjust your food recommendations and your supplements. But we recommend that at least in the short term, do every 6 months. And once you get to a point where you feel good, then you should be doing once a year. Remember, we tune our car once a year, for heaven's sake. If you can at least tune our body once a year.
Agree. Related question. Does your microbial profile change daily, monthly? How frequently?
Yeah, so actually, it's very interesting question. So the answer is every time you eat food, it doesn't change. It's like literally is throwing a pebble in the lake. There is a little bit of perturbation, but it comes right back. So what happens is the microbes are a massive ecosystem. Remember, 40 trillion of them are constantly interacting with each other. And these microbes cannot change their gene expression very quickly because it takes a lot of energy for them to say, no longer I am getting this substrate, I have to survive by changing my underlying function to express differently so I can survive. So if you change your diet completely for 3 months or 4 months, then your ecosystem functionality completely changes. But changing the daily foods or weekly, we in fact, in our paper that we published, we showed people that if they keep eating food just they normally do, which is a different food every day, for 30 days, we measured people's microbiome every single day. And AI was able to predict which all 30 samples came from the same person. So there was not any significant change.
Okay. And we just have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
There is one other main question. Is the elimination of one, in quotes, evil, like processed sugar, really a silver bullet that will create a healthier person? Are there some foods that we all react to with inflammation?
So I think that's a good question. Remember, I was very careful. I said there is no such thing as universal healthy food. There is no food that's good for everyone, but there are certain foods that are bad for everyone. And I think you just hit on one of them. So processed food, sugar is just not good for, or fried, and that, just eating fried food. None of those are good for anyone. So yes, there are universal unhealthy food, but there is no universal healthy food.
Okay, good. I think that's a good point. And I think we have time for the last question. Do you have research to support Alzheimer's and leaky gut?
We are currently working on it, but I'm happy if people just Google Alzheimer and gut microbiome. You will see a tremendous amount of research. There are two research that you should look at. One of them is oral microbiome, P. gingivalis being involved in the Alzheimer. Other ones are actually just called leaky gum. And the second one is the research actually coming out of it. There's several of the organisms, including Fusobacterium nucleatum, that may be involved, that comes from the leaky gut, that may be involved actually in the Alzheimer.
Great. Well, Naveen, this has been really fascinating. As someone who tends to look at things from the macro level, you're getting to this very micro molecular level, but coming to the same place, actually, hoping to improve people's health and well-being has been very interesting. In the last 30 to 60 seconds, do you want to summarize or have a final statement about your work?
Well, Linda, all I can do is that, this is not my problem. This is not your problem. This is our problem as such. And if we cannot come together to solve this problem, we're going to watch our children and grandchildren suffer. So please go to Viome.com, sign up, because it's going to help you feel better. And by the way, get all your family, because this is, once we learn more and we have millions of people we have data for, we will be able to understand the underlying mechanism of action. And there is going to be one day when we won't need Viome. And that will be the happiest day of my life. I don't need the company to survive. I just need to make sure that people don't suffer anymore.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. That was a great
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you, Linda.